Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, brother. How are you?
Oh, living the dream, Tim. Living the dream.
Kevin, I'm mad at Elizabeth Warren right now. I mean,
no,
I'm not.
Would she?
She has failed to fix this surge pricing issue. So I'm stuck at a Motel 6 right now, and I don't know.
You're a victim of surge pricing with hotels, so now you're And Elizabeth Warren, she championed it, just couldn't get it through. Your hero, Elizabeth Warren.
She promises to fix these things. She gets my hopes up, and here I am at a Motel 6 by an airport. That's probably a halfway house. Like, I don't know. It's a wild situation. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with halfway houses. Like, it's okay. It's just not what I've come to expect from my hotel stays.
Yeah. And what I think, Tim, is that you just need to donate more to Elizabeth Warren and vote harder. And that's going to fix all your problems.
Kevin, I'm voting so hard. I'm going to vote. I'm probably going to break the pen when I scratch through that ballot. That's how hard I'm going to vote. It's going to be
that's the way to do it. That means your vote, it doesn't actually count more, but spiritually it counts more.
And spiritually, I'll feel better, which is really probably the most important part of this. You see what I'm saying?
It is.
Like how I feel. Everything is about how we feel, Kevin. And if
that's right.
I vote really hard, I'm going to feel, ripped off still. But anyway.
Probably still not great. But anyway, so we are going to talk about free speech today. We have a whole bunch of free speech news this week. So we're going to talk about that. We may get around to a handful of other things too, but we're probably going to spend most of the show talking about free speech. I named the show The Never Ending Fight for Free Speech because you can't take it for granted. And this is 4 things popped up this week about free speech, like governments, and not just people are saying bad things about me, I'm being canceled. No, governments actually trying to stop people from speaking.
Absolutely. It's a wild world. It's a wonder walls, if you will.
Wonder walls. Terrible. No. Okay. All right. Some speech should be censored. That's we found our line.
That last joke should have been censored.
Yeah. No. So we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll get to a handful of other things. Tim has a whole bunch of articles. I might talk about the tax-free tips thing if we get to it. So we're going to go in about 10 seconds. All and of course, leave your comments and participate in the show. We love it. All right. Going in 3, 2.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. I'm here. Look, I've changed my name to the least of many evils. I don't know.
I did see that on Twitter. I apologize for not giving you your proper name, Tim, the least of many evils O'Connor. I'll do better.
Yeah.
But no, it's a fair name, and that's really all we can expect. That's all we can hope for. The least of many evils.
Vote harder, we'll get the least of many evils. That'll be good.
Yeah, that's an improvement, maybe.
Yeah. Well,
or actually, it's like when they talk about spending decreases, but it's really just a decrease in the increase. That's kind of what you're offering here.
Yes, that's exactly correct. Exactly. Because like inflation, evil is apparently a cumulative effect. But if we get it under a certain rate of evil, people will celebrate and clap their hands. They'll be very, very happy with the world. So, I mean, that's who I am. That's what I'm going to be.
2% evil target. All right, let's go.
That was good, man. Yeah, that's it. 2% evil.
Right on.
Change my name again.
There we go. Perfect. Anyway, so WSL audience, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to mostly talk about free speech stuff, because there's been a handful of free speech things that have happened recently. So we're going to tie it all into one mega segment, maybe two segments of this show. We'll see how long we go on, and then give a bit of a defense of free speech, right? Because yeah, free speech is something that is pretty easy to take for granted in the United States, because like the U.S. is pretty good at it, but both culturally and in terms of restricting the government from infringing on our right to say what we want. Other countries, it is not the case. Both the culture and like the legal history of free speech is a lot thinner. And so we see instances where it starts to break down quickly, especially when there's any sort of like cultural emergency or anything else going on, like suddenly free speech is out the window. We got to shut down hate. We got to shut down misinformation. So we're going to pick on Europe a bit today, but also on Tim Walz and other folks in the United States who kind of see speech in the same way. So I want to give a robust overview of free speech, and let's start with the UK. Tim, do you want to explain what's going on in the UK in terms of like some of the laws they had passed, I think last year, and then what they said about Americans?
Well, Kevin, it's kind of bizarre what's going on in the UK. They're literally cracking down on what they're calling hate speech. What the hate speech, as I understand it, what Britain is calling it, memes that make fun of the government, memes that may incite violence, memes that like they will jail people over memes. I don't know if you remember, like, I think it was almost 2 years ago. We did a show and I made a joke about, hey, guess who's jailed the most people for speech violations? And it was something like 1,700 back in 2021. And like everybody kind of just goes, well, Russia or, Saudi Arabia or something like that. England has been doing this, and they've been sliding on this authoritarian path now for several years. And I think it's just getting worse, Kevin. I don't think that they're winning any battles.
Yeah, and I'll give like the steel man version of like what they think they're accomplishing here, right? Because it's the same argument that underlies what Tim Walz is saying, what the Biden administration has done in the past, and what social media companies were doing through their own efforts, which is there's a lot of people who are saying things that are hateful or that are untrue. And in that speech has real world consequences where people choose to act on hateful words or untrue words in a way that can cause destruction. So it might cause like, individual acts of racist violence to rioting, right? Which there are rioting. There's rioting happening in the UK, which is why they're starting to crack down on this stuff a little bit more, and they're blaming it on free speech. And so like there's this thought again, the Biden administration, Facebook said like, oh well, like if someone's saying something hateful, then it doesn't really count as free speech. If someone's saying untrue, it doesn't count as free speech. If someone's saying something that undermines our democracy, it doesn't count as free speech. And actually, I'm going to read a quote from Vice Presidential candidate and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He says, "There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy."
Yeah, that's authoritarian garbage. Okay, like there is the limit of free speech is that as long as you don't hurt anybody with your speech causing real harm, there are no limits on free speech. There's not imaginary harm. There's not emotional feelings getting hurt. It's an opportunity to learn who people are and whether we want to associate with them as a free society, not as the boot is on someone's neck. Like that's the government boot, I should emphasize. Like that there are no limits on free speech unless you hurt people somehow, like the incitement to violence.
Right. Because there is some limit on like free speech ish in the United States, right? But like the incitement to violence in the US is way, way, way stricter than it is in the UK. In the UK, it could be like you said something that got people riled up, even though you didn't directly tell them to do anything or even imply that they should do anything. Whereas in the US, you can say all sorts of like implied violence and even sometimes, suggested violence. But unless you are directly like encouraging someone to do a violent act, like immediately, it's mostly covered. which is why like people can talk about like things like violent fantasies. People can talk about misinformation. People can talk about like bad, hateful things. But here's the thing. I don't want the government like being the arbiter of what those things are, either hateful things or what is or is not truth, because there's so much pressure for the government to declare things misinformation that might in fact just be an inconvenient truth for the government. No, sometimes it is like it's lies, it's nonsense, right? Like there's a lot of that, right? And we're going to talk a little bit later about like the defense of free speech and lies and things like that. But there's some bad stuff out there. However, we've seen situations in the US where like they tried that. We'll go back to the COVID thing, like where they tried to say like, oh, you can't talk about the COVID virus emerging from the Wuhan lab in China. That's fake news. That's misinformation. You can't talk about, masking, which again, I kind of generally fell on the side of like, masks kind of work sometimes, but like there's some folks like, oh, we need to shut down these YouTube channels because they are skeptical and they're talking about like, they don't think masks are effective for preventing COVID. Well, turns out that they were probably closer to the right than wrong.
Yeah, and you couldn't talk about statistical realities associated with the COVID pandemic, okay? Like people were doing a good job of keeping track of statistics, and the statistical arguments became the purview solely of the government and the mainstream media. Guys like Alex Berenson, who were doing legit statistical analysis, if flawed or if imperfect, it doesn't matter. That dude lost his platform on X, and that was beyond unfortunate. We missed opportunities to tell the truth, especially about younger people and the whole COVID thing, man. Like,
right. And so I don't want to make this all about COVID. I just want to like reference that example because like we've talked about it before. We fleshed out those arguments, or like the Hunter Biden laptop example, which I thought was nonsense, but we talked about it, and it turns out that ended up being like pretty true. It smelled like nonsense, but but it was ridiculous that like there was pressure from the government, and then Twitter ultimately like shut down the New York Post article like talking about it. Like, no, let's hash it out. Let's talk about it. Let's like figure out if it's true or not true. Like, and look at the evidence. And that's what like we as Americans do. That is our culture. Like, okay, like let's break this down and obsess over it and like figure it out and eventually hope to get to some sort of truth. But like when you have the alternative where the government just says, oh, well, we're going to shut down stuff, like there ends up being, a degradation in the culture of like trying to like come to reasonable conclusions based on evidence, based on like talking through stuff. And it ends up just being force, right? It ends up just being like, this is the opinion. And if you don't like it, like we're going to hurt you. And then the alternative to that of like, okay, what am I going to choose to act violently in order to like, advocate for my beliefs, right? It ends up leading to political violence. Like it's inevitable if you don't give people an outlet to be able to effectively criticize the government, to make arguments, even bad arguments. Like the case for free speech is that like we don't know, we can't assume that a particular argument is bad. We can't assume that a particular argument is true. Okay, tell people to put out evidence. Like I've made my criticisms like anti-vaxxers, but like put out your evidence, and then we will like talk about it and break it down, and like maybe not come to an agreement, but like we have a right to hash that out and try to come to sort of truth, because like there might be something there. There might be something worth discussing, and we won't know that unless we allow people the fundamental right to be able to discuss things freely.
Look, I think people, everyday people that I talk to about their political issues are way more reasonable than the government gives them credit for being. Okay, so when I watch, and again, these guys have free speech, right? Like Hakeem Jeffries has free speech to demonize MAGA Republicans every single day all over Twitter and get like all of his phone banks liking his tweets. Like he has the right to do that. So why don't other people have the right to criticize him? Where do we draw the line? Where do we stop? And so that's kind of the issue, Kevin. Like, does it have a limit? Like you can yell fire in a crowded movie theater and you're fine unless someone panics and gets hurt because you yell fire.
Yeah. There might be some civil liability in some cases, but for the most part, you can yell fire in a crowded theater like that. That's
you
like,
can.
Yeah, because sometimes like you need to. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
It's just, sometimes you need to. Sometimes it's necessary to yell fire in a crowded theater because like there is a fire in a crowded theater, right?
Right.
That's that's like the fire in a crowded theater speech ends up being like an argument against speech, but really like it's sometimes it needs to happen. Sometimes like we need the unconventional speech because like that is what the situation warrants. And I do want to get to the go ahead. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I just want to point out that the people use the thing about not yelling fire in a movie theater incorrectly every single day. The ruling was yes, you can yell fire in a movie theater as long as it doesn't incite an incident where someone gets hurt. Like you can do it. It is free speech. You're free to say it as long as no one gets physically hurt from it. That was as I understood it, the ruling. So
yeah. And so the two things we want to talk about in terms of like how the Europeans are dealing with speech right now. So the one is like we talked about like the UK thing, but also Tim, we kind of left out like the most interesting part about it, which is that there is a police chief saying that he could extradite and jail U.S. citizens over online posts. Now, again, do they actually have the ability to do that? No, not really. Like, and it's sort of like oh, maybe we could find some way to go after them, but like, I don't think it's serious. But still, I did love many of the memes in response to it. I've never seen so many postings of the Declaration of Independence in my life. It was well done. Most of folks responded appropriately, like left, right, and center. Like again, I saw people across the political spectrum who are just like, nope, we kicked you guys out in 1776, and this is why. This is exactly why we did it.
I have a chilling piece of news about this, though, Kevin. I want to be clear that guy, as wrong as he was, and as much as he was justifiably mocked by the entire world, especially people in the United States, there are cases where people have participated in speech and been arrested by their local authorities. Okay. And I'm not saying that this guy is any kind of hero. Okay. But a man named Donald Day Jr. of Phoenix, Arizona, he's 56 years old. He was participating in talking with people in Australia who ended up committing a crime. And he offered them words of encouragement and words of support. And they raided his house. They busted him. And they've got him arrested for 2 counts of speech, interstate speech violations. And plus, of course, once they got access to his house, they found a couple of illegal weapons and like probably some marijuana. So this dude is jacked up and in a lot of trouble. So when we laugh at that little British police officer, let me tell you, there's a real possibility that they will do it. And there's a real possibility that they already have done it. So,
yeah, I mean, I was trying to get to the bottom of that one. Like, I didn't really understand like the speech crimes that you get, like if it was Australian law that like they were trying to extradite him on. Was that the case?
He got charged in law? Yeah, it was American law, and he got charged locally. Like he got charged locally for let me see if I can find it. I have the article. Let's see. He expressed a desire to incite violence and threaten a variety of groups and individuals, including law enforcement and government authorities. He posted a YouTube video threatening any law enforcement official who came to his residence. Separately, as to count 2, threatened to kill a victim. The Director General of the World Health Organization. Like, is that a real threat? If you threaten to kill if it's a
true threat, it's got to be a true threat, right? Like it can't just be bluster. Like in the U.S., usually it's like it's got to be that you have to. The prosecution has to prove like you mean it and you intend to like carry it out if given the opportunity. Basically,
so based on his participation with 2 people that did commit a horrendous act of violence in which 2, I believe, Queensland officers ended up losing their lives. They did investigate him and they did find problems with him. They did charge him with speech violations, though it does look like he's winning the battle on that. But because they had access to his house, they've got him on charges of illegal guns.
Stuff. Yeah. So I don't know about, and again, No, I don't know much about this case, and I don't think Tim's saying like this is a good guy. It's just that
No, I'm not.
because we always
I'm not
defend
saying
like
he's
the
a
edge
good guy.
cases of speech too. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's really important to defend those those cases where someone is doing something ugly. They have like terrible speech. Again, folks like the ACLU used to get it when like the famous Skokie incident where there's a Nazi rally in that area, and they're like, no, you have a right to be on the street and to have your views heard, and even if they're ugly, like it's what it is. I mean, now I think like ACLU's kind of backed away from that type of stuff. Really, Fire is more the organization taking on those tough cases because they'll defend like far left weirdos like in edge circumstances as well.
That was the kind of liberal that I wanted to be, Kevin. The liberal that said, no, what is right. As long as these Nazis don't commit violence, they have the right to say things because then we know who they are. Then we're free to disassociate with them and we're free to mock them publicly and confront their views. That was what the ACLU was all about. That is a way around like violence. You oppress Nazis and all of a sudden, I think it's like the terrorist thing, like 10 minus 2 = 20. It's a real problem when we get there and we get there through government inspired violence.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's a lot of temptation to use violence because, there's that, because I'll see this on the left and the right. It's like, well, if we don't stop these violent people first, if we allow them to just speak their mind, then like they're going to take over and kill us. So we've got to strike first. And I see that type of thinking creeping in, not just on the left, right, but like on the Republican side too, like the JD Vance type folks. We've got to use tools of government to like as self-defense.
You cannot like persuade me that they're not almost exactly the same thing. They're participating in the same cultural stuff,
Yeah, Chris Rufo does that in Florida too, like where he's like, "Oh, we need to ban like certain type of discussions in classrooms about like woke ideologies." I'm like, no, like what needs to happen is if like you disagree with those, your kids disagree with them, then like you need to prepare them with the intellectual tools to be able to argue against it. Like that's what it is. Like like we need to have the fortitude to defend our ideas in all places and not just resort to government violence and restriction.
Yeah, I mean, and I would prefer it to be used as an argument for school choice, voucher systems, and things like that. I think that's a better argument. Like that's more effective to me.
But you need both. No, like really, like I want to like raise my boys to be able to like hold their own, like in an argument, like because I mean that's what I did in school too. Like I would talk to like if teachers were spouting off some like nonsense, like because they would say the thing like, oh, communism works great in theory, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. It works bad in theory. It works bad in real life. Millions of people die. Like I want to talk about this stuff. Like it's important to defend that. And like when your peers around you are kind of getting sucked into like that sort of mindset with an authority figure, like you need to raise kids who can like speak truth to power in those situations and not just like, hey, this is the government orthodoxy, like you're gonna listen to it and like that's it. And I know student free speech rights are a little bit limited, but still like there's something to having persuasive arguments in an academic setting. All right, on that note though, we're a little bit over time. Thanks again for joining us here on Free Solution WISL. We're gonna be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. Let me get to the Elon Musk thing, which I want to do. I want to do a little bit of that the next segment. Maybe we'll go to something else. But in the meantime, I mean, let's maybe get to a few of our few of these comments.
Yeah.
Kevin, you expect children to be better at making valid points when the White House can't even do it? Someone's got to. I haven't given up on it yet. Just because like the press secretary and Kamala Harris have phoned it in, and Biden has phoned it in.
They phoned it in for years, man. Like this, it's a weird time. There is no win to coming up with valid platforms and campaigning on common sense problems that you're going to solve. It's like we talked about last week. It's all vibes, brother. It's all vibes.
And then if she goes and does an interview, then like maybe someone will like question her and be like, hey, what about this dumb position you took in 2019? And then she'd have to answer something tough. Oh no. Let's just do stuff that feels good.
What's going on with the world when half of mainstream media, 3/4 of mainstream media endorses Kamala Harris not taking an interview with a reporter, which is journalism? Like, they are what we think they are. They are part of the Stasi, they're part of the system. They're so thoroughly ingrained in the system that it's embarrassing. There is no journalism other than guys like me and you and some of the bigger names doing real work, talking about real issues. Like that. That's it. What's that?
I don't know that I'm doing real journalism, but I think we
Brian
provide something
Stelter
valuable
does.
and entertaining. I wouldn't call it journalism.
It's realer than what Brian Stelter does, bud. Like, that's
you know.
what I'm saying. Like, it's realer than the morning shows. It's realer than Joy Behar. You know what I mean? It's realer than all of those things. So I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe.
Let's see. I saw something up here. Where'd it go?
You can get to it. Someone who's is the government going to shut down stuff because the wall's still in Valor now? I'm not gonna I don't know. I'm not like all that animated about the wall stuff, but like some of that stuff could happen, right? Like where this is a bit of a ridiculous example, but where like news stations could be like, no, it's not real. Like, so we're, not going to, or like social media companies or the government itself could say like, well, we can't allow this type of misinformation to spread. And so what ends up happening, let's see, there's another, I'm going to tie this point in the air. Shelley on YouTube says, I have a friend in England who runs an underground newspaper. It's mostly about football teams, but he doesn't have a license to run a newspaper. So this is one of the ways that governments around the world end up controlling speech is they issue license for news stations and newspapers, etc. The U.S. does not do this. Donald Trump has proposed it before because he's like, oh, we should remove the license of CNN, whatever. No, it's a bad idea. Like that's tyrant stuff. We shouldn't do it. But like that's how they control speech and say, oh, well, like we're not trying to limit your speech. We're just saying that like if you're spreading like hate and lies, then we're going to take your license away because that's just a responsible thing to do. Like, and it doesn't set like people like to pretend it sounds better coming from who's the guy named like Keir Starmer than it does from Maduro. But like Maduro is doing the same thing down in Venezuela. It's like, all right, like people who spread misinformation about me losing the election, you're going to get your license taken away.
Yeah, it didn't sound better to me coming from Keir Starmer. He had a vicious authoritarian side to what he was saying. And he's like ratcheting up prosecution to the point where kids who were watching people at a protest who didn't participate still got arrested, Kevin. Like they are arresting people all over England for all sorts of things. And it's absolutely bizarre. Keir Starmer, when I was calling him PC Principal, like PC Principal is actually better than a better human being, a better character, a cartoon character still, but like a better human being than Keir Starmer. He's awful. He's just a bad man. And look, England's in a lot of trouble. The UK is in a lot of trouble. I hope they figure out a way to fix this without violence, but I don't see how it ends without violence, Kevin.
No, I mean, listen, again, like some of the folks being arrested, I'm not going to defend everything like they believe or whatever. Like I don't need to, right? Like there needs to be a very high bar for throwing someone in a cage and using violence against them. And, sometimes just people who are like out and about and at the wrong time, whatever, or believe something stupid and share like something stupid, but like, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't go to jail for that. And again, the UK is facing like actual like riots. There are people like looting stores and stuff. Like it's a thing, but, and like what you could end up with, like again, the case for defending free speech is there are people who are talking about this. There are people who are talking about like there's a bunch of like working class white people who are rioting and like looting stores, and supposedly there's like immigrants who are like fighting. And if you spread something that isn't approved by the government of England, even if it happens to be true in some cases, and it later turns out to be true, like you could get like arrested for spreading misinformation that could lead to violence, even if like what you are showing, what you are talking about ends up being true. That's the concern. Again, in the United States, like if someone puts out something that is not real, we just talk about it. Sometimes in annoying ways, but like we talk through it. And we, it's important for citizens of the Republic to have discernment and to try to arrive at like logical and reasonable conclusions. And if like you trust that you live in a republic with citizens who have a responsibility to do that, you're going to have a better, more effective, and more free government. If they're merely subjects who are just, responding to whatever whims mobs respond to, and you need to like rule over them, then you're certainly going to take a different view on that. And the monarchy of England and the United Kingdom certainly seem to take that view of their own subjects.
Long live the king, Kevin. Long live the king. It's a mess over there. I wish them good things. I hope this settles down. I hope they figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and don't bring that crap here.
No, absolutely. And Charlie wants to say the press pass required here, sort of, right? It's like if you want to be on Air Force One in the press pool, like, yeah, you need a press pass, right? Like they're not letting anyone just like wander in, for better or worse, but you can write about what the president is doing. You can, tweet at the president now. You can do all sorts of stuff and have your opinion heard. You might not be in the same room as the president, but there are ways of like breaking in and not literally, but like having like your opinion about something heard. Press passes, mixed feelings. It can be abused. Certainly the Biden administration has actually kind of abused their limited access to the media.
Oh, absolutely. They look.
I'm just saying it's on a different level than a license, though. It's just not quite as bad as that.
True. All right, fair enough. Yeah. So we should probably, I guess, get back.
Yeah. No, we'll go back. We could have had all this stuff as part of the show too.
It was good. Yeah.
Yeah, but so we'll go back in a couple seconds, and I want to talk about the EU thing as well. Because I don't know, find it interesting. Okay, let's go back. Yeah. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host here today, joined by Tim. The least of all evils, O'Connor?
No, not the least of all evils. The least of many evils.
The least of many evils.
Yeah, the least of many evils, because look, that's honestly in today's society, that's the best that we can hope for. And look, a big shout out to the WYSL audience for listening to us on Thursday nights. But look, you guys are missing some of the show. Kevin and I cover a lot more comments during the intermission. So either join us when we're doing our live broadcast or check out our show on Spotify, YouTube, and even reruns on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you participate in the future. We'd love to have you listen to the rest of the show.
Yeah, 100%. Right. It's fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So we had a couple more like news speech things that we wanted to cover. So one of them being the letter that the European Commission sent to Elon Musk.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
Yeah. So what this letter says is that basically so Elon Musk did a Twitter Spaces with Donald Trump, and in anticipation of this, the European Commission, a person named Thierry Breton, she sent out a letter saying like it could violate European speech codes, which same pattern as before, but essentially that it would violate the, what do they call it? The DSA, the Digital Services Act, for it would have like illegal content that would violate their speech codes, basically basically misinformation, and they wouldn't be able to correct that misinformation in a live stream with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is known for his misinformation, which, to be fair, isn't totally unfair, but basically they're saying like they're threatening that the kind of continued existence of Twitter to be able to operate in Europe, in the European Union, if he moved ahead with Spaces with Donald Trump. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Look, get the beat button ready. But listen, this is classic authoritarianism, and I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again when we're talking about speech. Like, look, how would I know that Trump was slurring his words if this letter and this person Thierry Breton was successful in getting this space to not happen? All right, the issue that they're trying to do, this veiled threat, and look, man, I'm telling you, I am beyond ecstatic that Trump and Musk stood up to that attempt at legal lawfare threatening kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
that's what free speech is about. Like, you can threaten me with your petty laws, you petty tyrant, but I'm going to go ahead and say what I want to say,
Just do it anyway.
and let's see what you do, you know?
No,
And,
I mean,
and I enjoyed that piece of it. It was a
no,
great vibe.
absolutely. Like he did do that. Both Donald Trump and Elon Musk, because like, yeah, we shouldn't allow Europeans to dictate whether or not like someone can be interviewed on Twitter. For goodness sakes, like an American president, like we get value out of that. We get value out of knowing how like goofy Trump is in some cases, right? It's not just about promoting him. I mean, it kind of felt like it at times, but like it's not just about promoting him. It's also like we get to learn something like good and bad about him. And I was able to finally zoom in on the letter, but I want to like read part of it. It says, let me clarify that any negative effect of illegal content on X and the EU, which should be attributed to the ineffectiveness of the way in which X applies relevant provisions of the DSA, may be relevant in the context of the ongoing proceedings of X's compliance with EU law, so basically threatening their existence to operate in the EU. So this is in line with what's already been done in the recent past, for example, in relation to the repercussions and amplification of terrorist content or content incites violent hate and racism in the EU, such as context of the recent riots in the United Kingdom. So they're tying it back to the UK stuff as well.
Yeah, and the emergency order that they issued to upgrade their enforcement of their speech laws. So
Yeah.
it's typical authoritarian, petty tyrant tactics. And again, I want to reiterate, like, how would I know that Trump rambled and slurred his way through an Elon Musk interview? It was an unmitigated disaster, Kevin. And look, that's a quote from a USA Today op-ed about the whole Trump speech. I actually did not feel that way, but I do want to get into a little bit of the specifics, but maybe it's too soon for that. Do you got some more you want to cover about?
Well, so just one more thing, which is I saw a tweet that said like the free speech rights that are broadly the norms of the internet are an accident of the internet starting in the US. Internet companies operating here. We're forcing the First Amendment in a world that doesn't want us. A guy named Ryan Moulton. I have no idea who this is, but like I thought it was a really good point in that, like, yeah, like we're lucky that like a lot of the social media companies didn't emerge in France or in, any of the European countries that have a different view of free speech. Like Americans are kind of unique in how much we like value and like put free speech protection into law. Like it's just not a thing anywhere else. Again, you and I bash the government quite a bit, like, but
we do.
Culturally, like free speech is like a very unique thing in the US. It's not the same even in Canada. It's not the same thing. Like it is a very American thing. And it is not, despite our success is because of things like having free speech, in addition to all the free market stuff as well. But it's because we allow the robust and open exchange of ideas that we're able to be a richer and better and more free country.
That was well said, and it's a beautiful sentiment. I think we've oftentimes made a pretty big issue about it, our awareness of the fact that we get to say things without fear of being in a cage. Like if I want to call Trump a bumbling idiot, if I want to say Biden has dementia and he's a total train wreck, and Kamala Harris called him a racist pedophile and she's the vice president underneath him, like I can say those things on the internet and we don't get in trouble for them because we
shouldn't go to jail for it.
Yeah,
it's stupid. And like again, in the UK, like it's like if you say something mean about someone that like might be true, like their like libel laws over there, way stricter. It's way stricter. Like you cannot say like mean things about people. You can't say mean things about the court system. If you don't like the outcome of a court system, like, oh, you can't undermine the integrity of the courts by criticizing them. Man, we criticize the heck out of our court system, as we should, because sometimes the court systems deserve it. But could you imagine if you couldn't say like mean things about the or critical things, not even mean critical things of the Supreme Court, because that would undermine our constitutional order, that would undermine our court system. Absolutely ridiculous. We live in a country where we get to criticize that stuff, and it makes our system better.
It makes the world better, and it offers people honestly, I made jokes about should we let NATO like invade Britain? I don't know that they could get away with that if they were British. Like, I don't know if they can make jokes like that.
No, they probably couldn't. You're inciting violence, Tim.
Yeah, Brad Palumbo had the best one. He's like, they should literally be begging us to invade them right now or colonize them. And that actually is pretty good. And Brad's actually pretty good, like, voice of conservative libertarian thought on the internet. I don't agree with everything he says, but by God, I don't agree with anyone all of the time. You know,
they're going to agree us as liberators. I think there's a good case for it, Tim.
We freed ourselves from them, and now we should free them from themselves, Kevin. That's how
That's right.
So look, did you catch any of the Elon Musk Trump interview? Like, I listened to it. I found it to be a very enjoyable conversation between two very interesting, whether you like them or not, charismatic individuals that exist in our society at a certain point in time where what they seem to be saying is important. But I had this one moment where I am quite convinced that Donald J. Trump has no more idea how inflation works than Kamala Harris. I want to be very clear about that. Like,
what do he say? Like, that rings true to me. I don't know what did he say though.
All right. So first of all, it comes off more as a vibe than me remembering the conversation word for word. But like, Elon kind of tried to say, hey, like, bad government monetary policy causes inflation, and Donald Trump was like, well, gas prices definitely cause inflation, and if we get the gas prices lower, and he's like, well, Elon tried to circle back around to it, and it was like, hey, like, if the government spends less money, Kamala Harris is going to be so bad on inflation, I'm going to be great on inflation. And it was like, and Trump never
Elon's just trying to educate him. Like, no, listen, like, it's really important you understand this point.
Elon did a really good job of politely keep bringing it back to this notion that bad monetary policy causes inflation. Like, and Trump's like, I can fix it with gas. Like, and Kamala Harris is going to be way worse than me on inflation. Like, way. She is so, like, this is the worst administration on inflation in the history of administrations. Like, he did typical Trump stuff where he kind of just talked in circles.
The worst administration on inflation since mine.
And I'm like, man, I appreciated the fact that Elon Musk put in a good effort there, where he was trying to explain to Donald Trump that bad monetary policy causes inflation. And now look, Kevin, we're at a stage in history where people are like, hey, inflation just got under 3%. And they're like, yay. And it's like, oh my God, no one, I blame public schools and dopamine awards for people plainly not understanding mathematical realities of like dumping water into soup, of taking an 8-slice pizza and cutting it into thin slices and being like, look, there's more pizza. You know what I mean? It's just like, they just don't seem to understand. And frankly, I can understand people kind of tried to make the point of, as a real estate investor, as a guy who's like, I want my properties to appreciate, and I'm playing a money game. And as long as I stay ahead of, as long as I collect enough rent to stay ahead of the mortgage payment on this thing, that's fantastic. And if the property appreciates, I'm making real money, respecting a level of inflation in our economy. Now, that's fine, but that is still not that's not sound monetary policy. So his perspective on monetary policy is actually just as terrifying as Joe Biden's and Kamala Harris's. And like
a lot of the spending that led to the inflation that we had, it happened under Trump. Like, it did, it's the
Kevin, there was a pandemic. It was emergency spending. Yeah. Like, I agree with you. There was $7 trillion that he just created and sent all over the place. And
he wasn't exactly, like, taking it easy on raising the national debt when he was like before the pandemic either. Like again,
Oh, that's true. That's true. Like,
just gathering up the most debt of any president in history until Biden. It's
I'll show you how it's done. The whole Biden administration, because it wasn't Biden ever. Let's be honest. This guy's been in cognitive decline. We could see it coming. He campaigned from his basement for a reason. He put people 20 feet away from him in circles for a reason. Okay. Like he didn't do long form conversations for a reason. We all saw those reasons. We all talked about the reasons. The entire mainstream media, his entire administration, they all lied for him, Kevin, for years. Okay. Like, it's inexcusable what happened there. Wow. Okay. Sorry. I lost track.
No, I know.
What was I talking about?
Sorry. You just got like frothing about the mainstream media and how much you hate them.
Whew, man.
Just black out there for a second. It's fine.
Yeah. I got a sip of beer. Hold on.
Yeah. No. Those are all great points. And again, I would love Donald Trump to come around on a bunch of those issues, right? Like I'd love him to come around on like understanding the seriousness of how inflation not only affects his, legacy, reputation, and electability, but also how it affects the lives of everyday people. I suspect the former might be more appealing, but it's a serious thing that he needs to address. In addition to like other values that we talk about in terms of hoping he adopts them, and like in terms of lowering taxes, lowering regulations, and maybe in the next segment we'll talk about the taxing on tips thing, because I might have sort of like come around to the other side on that, being against against removing the taxes on tips. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe you can convince me to back down. Maybe convince me it's we should just remove taxes on that one thing, and with no consequences, negative consequences whatsoever.
No, there'll be negative consequences. We'll talk about it.
There's always trade-offs.
I think there will be negative consequences, and I'm here for them.
You're excited about the negative consequences. All right. So on that note, if you want to hear about taxing tips and other stuff, we got a whole bunch of stuff. You know how we do with the third segment. It's going to be all over, folks. It's going to be fun, but we're all out of time for a free solution for this segment. We got one more for you, WYSL. Talk to you in a few minutes. All right. And keep this one on time. We went 4 minutes over last time, Tim.
Oof.
I
can walk outside of my door and have a puff of my nicotine addiction. So let me do that. You vamp for a second and I'll be right back. Like, I won't smoke the whole cigarette. It will be very quick.
Just smoke in the room, you coward.
Get to hear a jet fly overhead while I have the door open. Won't that be awesome?
Yeah. I think we had a comment at the beginning of this from Shelly. Says Mario Cuomo put $25 a night tax on hotel rooms and took away smoking rooms. Sorry, this is Mario Cuomo's fault that Tim can't just smoke in his hotel room while doing the show. So we can blame him. So I want to get to a couple other comments. This fell on Twitter. Repenterburn says, how has America shifted from Jewish lawyers defending Klan members' rights to free speech to equating misinformation to literal violence? And so this is why I named the episode "The Never Ending Fight for Free Speech," because that's kind of always been a thing. It's always been a thing since probably the beginning of time, practically, of people want to say like, oh, well, some free speech doesn't count. Some free speech is too hateful, too violent, or untrue, and therefore we can't defend that speech, or might even be untrue. It doesn't even have to actually be untrue. And so, yeah, I mean, the ACLU shifted. Yeah. So like, and again, with Tim, I was just saying like, it's always kind of been there. So that's why we need to like constantly remind people of why free speech has value, because if we don't defend those values, like constantly, like year after year, and it's a grind, I get it, but like you can't take for granted that like what we have is a great thing and doesn't need to be defended constantly. And that's work. It sucks, but like, if we don't remind people of why it has value, then they're going to slip in that stuff. Like they start making exceptions for different things, and then you end up talking like Tim Walz, where he says like, misinformation doesn't count as free speech, and hate speech doesn't count as free speech. But like, yeah, it does. I don't like hate speech, and we can tell those people that they suck. But like, that's the counter speech. It's important to like have the conversation and not literally use violence against people who say things that we disagree with.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, Kevin, there was a counter protest in Skokie, Illinois, after the ACLU fought for their right to have their stupid parade that disbanded the parade. It was exactly how speech is supposed to work, and the ACLU was amazing back then. They were fearless, and they understood that standing on principle was more important than raising money. And now I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
Like,
they've sort of lost their way and just kind of become like the progressive law firm. So go look up Fire. Fire's the one that they're defending free speech nowadays.
Okay, that's
like they're
Gun Owners
really
of America is better than the NRA. Like, we need these new organizations to come in and enter into the fray, reinvigorate the debate.
Listen, the ACLU, like many other folks, like they fall into like this thinking of exceptions, and that's why it's important for new folks to come in sometimes and reinvigorate the argument, like, and defend the idea of free speech, because listen, it's thin everywhere. In Europe it's thin, and easily breaks through with government regulations, because the culture hasn't had like 200 years of like the actual free speech being a norm.
Yeah,
so
their rights are a gift from a monarchy, Kevin, and that's what the Magna Carta was a negotiation where the king said, well, if you guys let me keep my throne, you can have judges and lawyers, and we won't throw you in the cage right away. Like, it was a great precursor to the American, Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, but it went nowhere near far enough. If you read it as a gift from a king to a peasant, and that's how I read it when I read it 40 years ago.
It kind of is. And like a lot of European like ideological thinking is it's like either Hobbesian, or like where life is nasty, brutish, and short, if not for the government to like keep order, or it's like your rights, your ability to live and work and act and do whatever you do, you get the freedom to do those things from the state, right? Like that's it's like a totally flip thing from like the American conception of like rights being something more fundamental, like God-given if you want to do that, but like some sort of intrinsic rights. Like we have that right, and sometimes we limit those rights to like protect the liberty of other people. Like you can't kill someone, like some of your actions are limited, but like that's all done in furtherance of making sure that we have the ability to we protect life, liberty, and property in order to like be able to lead successful lives.
We used to. Okay, we used to.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Inconsistently, but that's why you got to keep fighting for it. Like that's why, like, I don't take that as like, oh my goodness, like we failed as a society, we've fallen. Like go look at like what speech looked like in the 1950s. Like you couldn't do a comedy routine in New York; it was considered indecent. Right? Like,
that's true.
Yeah, like literally comedians were getting arrested. Like in some ways we've gotten better, in some ways we've gotten worse. You have to keep fighting for that value constantly.
Right. That's a fair point. And yeah, I appreciate it. Someone tried to call me in the middle of this. What kind of craziness is that? Don't they know better? Whew.
Yeah. We got someone who is is this Spooner who said this, but whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that is either authorized such a government as we have had, or powerless to prevent it. In either case, it's unfit to exist.
I have a slightly different take on that. I love that comment, and I think it's very thought-provoking, and I think it should be said, and it should be repeated often, because it is absolutely true on some level. But what our success did, the success of individual liberty and the success of free markets, empowered a parasitic class. And if we just trim this parasitic class, like to the bone, like, I mean, to zero, like that's what happened.
You're going some weird directions, man. That can go so many different ways. No,
it's free speech, baby.
It is free speech.
Yeah.
No, I'm gosh, who's the guy who wrote about the United States in the early 19th century? He did kind of talk about that, how like once voters can figure out how they can vote themselves, like money.
Voltaire.
No, it wasn't Voltaire. Oh my God, I can't.
Just gonna
someone's gonna like either comment or like Either way, like in response to this comment from X, I take more of the Frederick Douglass side, that the Constitution is a glorious liberty document, that it is something that is a set of unfulfilled promises and still can act as a guide star to help us become a more free society.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I'm still there. I get Lysander Spooner's criticism.
Yeah, no,
which is
Lysander Spooner
especially
said
fair
more, right?
in and we'll read that too. It's especially fair in the 1850s.
This is the same guy that said this. And thanks to Zach for bringing this out. A man's natural rights are his own against the whole world, and any infringement of them is equally a crime, whether committed by one man or by millions, whether committed by one man calling himself a robber or by millions calling themselves a government. And look, so yes, I like his take on the Constitution. I think it should be discussed. I don't think it's perfectly right, but his next lines backing that up are beautiful, right? Like they work.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's gonna drive me crazy. I can't remember who wrote that book about like who was walking around America in like the early 19th century. It's gonna drive me crazy. Anyway, we'll have to move on and do the show though.
Yeah, well, Benjamin Franklin gets credit for one of the earliest iterations of it.
Dark Closet Mine YouTube says, when the people find that they can vote themselves money, that they will herald the end of the republic. Sell not liberty to purchase power.
That was
Benjamin Franklin, apparently. That's a good quote.
I'm pretty sure Voltaire said something about it too, but I don't know.
It was Voltaire, because there's a guy who like came to the United States and did a tour and then wrote like a famous book, and it's driving me crazy. I can't remember it.
Right.
But anyway, we should get back to the show though. We'll head back.
All right, give it
like
1 second because no, my internet's back. My internet was getting
back.
sideways.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah. We'll get back to the show and all right, go back in now. Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, host for the day, joined by Tim, the least of many evils, O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin, and one of the least of many evils that I found out during this current campaign season is that Liberty has forced Donald J. Trump and Kamala Harris to agree on something, and that is no tax on gifts over a table after you serve someone dinner. What do you think about that, Kevin?
No tax on tips. So I'll be honest. When I first heard Donald Trump did it, and then the Harris has done it now too. At first I was like, "Hey, that's a great thing." Right. And I think we talked about it briefly on the show too. It was like, oh, it makes sense to me. Like my mom, for most of my life growing up was a waitress. And, that's like a big part of our income. And, the wait staff isn't making a ton of money. Like, why should you tax tips? I think I might've been convinced to flip sides on this. And here's why.
Kevin.
Yeah,
it's and look, it's probably some Cato Institute Hanyak.
It is totally Beltway libertarian stuff. Like I think there's Matt Lincecum who was posting about this, and I think might have been Joe Bishop Henchman posting about it.
Man!
So, the Beltway libertarians, sorry, like the DC ones. But
right,
so basically the argument is like this, like. We could tax tips. It's a relatively narrow set of people who collect tips for a living relative to like the people who make in that realm, right? Like, so like if you're making like 36K or less, like it's not a big percentage of the population. So it really only affects like a small number of people. That small number of people happen to be like my mom. So like that's why I responded in the way I did. And I think many other people responded that way too. So one, it's a small group. Two, you have to think about how people respond to incentives, right? So the incentive is now, how everyone's complaining about how everyone asks for tips at every single like instance. Your drivers ask for tips, your barista's asking for tips, right? Like, because you say like every time you pay with a credit card now, you get prompted for a tip, even if like literally they've like pulled a sandwich out of a cooler and handed it to you, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of drives people nuts. If we eliminate taxes on tips, we're going to get way, way more of that, because what the incentive will be is like, okay, we're going to have employees have more tax-free income, which means that we're going to try to make more of their wages tip based, right? Like, so we might see like not just like, that happening like even more so at restaurants, coffee shops, etc., but also like professional classes like now asking for tips on stuff, right? With the hope that they develop the cultural expectation of that happening. That's what I think might happen. I think that sounds reasonable to me.
So I get it, but because it might be slightly more annoying that people are asking for tax-free money from you as part of your bill, that's the issue. Like,
I think it's going to end up with workers getting paid less. Actually, I think it's going to end up with like a lot of people who are outside the service industry now getting shifted to a more tip-based model, and they'll probably make less money from it. So that's one.
okay. As a contractor, I would say I like the idea of tips being tax-free, because I could easily say, look, on this $2,500 job, it's $2,000 if you give me a $300 tip. Like, I could save the customer money and I could save myself money.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Because look, the long-term effects of that is a lot less money going to the government.
So, but here's what I think is going to happen is that they're going to make some sort of rule about it, is that it can't be a pre-agreed upon thing.
Sure.
Right. So if you start doing that and you start making a significant amount of your income based on tips, the IRS is going to be digging through your records to be like, oh, is this really a tip, or is this a contract that you like pretended was a tip and like you should have been taxed on the income? So I think like people like you, if you did that, the IRS would be auditing you. And now they've got a whole bunch of new auditors to go and harass people like you. They're set up to do it. Like, that's what I think is going to happen to a bunch of folks. Like, because, I get it too. Like, because I've thought about that. I was like, oh, I wonder, like, could I do that in, my digital marketing model? Like, yeah, but like, what happens when like the government doesn't believe me that like 40% of my income is tips, right? And then they audit everything, and then I have to have like a very strict paper trail to prove that it was voluntary tips and not part of a contract.
Sure.
And then if it truly is voluntary, you're going to end up with some situations where people are like, it is stupid to tip you. You shouldn't have done that. I'm just going to pay you like this amount.
Okay. What I see it as an incremental step. Like, how do they say, okay, tips are not taxable, and yet we're still taxing other people that are making $36,000 a year at 15 to 20% of their income? How do they maintain that level of taxation if they've already granted an exemption for other lower middle class working people? I don't see that they can. So anything to me that lowers the impact and the taxation on especially lower middle class people and even middle class people and even working poor people, I'm okay with every single piece of it. I love chaos, and I think it would be like an ideal step in the direction.
So one, I don't actually love chaos. Like, I'm not quite a like state capacity libertarian. That's such a niche term.
Well, I'm a collapsitarian, Kevin. Like,
yeah, so I'm definitely not a collapsitarian. I'm like, the government should be like,
brother,
like very small and very competent, because when you end up with like incompetent governments, you would think that would like get governments to shrink, but it doesn't. It gets governments to grow. It's very annoying, like how counterintuitive that is. But like when there's less trust and more chaos in government, like people tend to say like, oh, we need more government to fix all the mistakes of government.
You are talking about my favorite subject, a benevolent, disinterested monarch who will golf his way to our freedom. That's exactly what we need. And honestly, that's all I'm going to accept from here on. So I am going to vote so hard till I have that.
I don't think that's good. Like, to me, like, it's okay. We need like a government that is like a third of a size of what's doing now, because it's doing less stuff, but doing less stuff more competently. Like, probably actually smaller than a third of the size that we have now, like at all levels.
I think an eighth.
Sure, I'd go for that. But like, if they could just like focus on fixing roads rather than like, so like some of the more ridiculous stuff that they spend money on, like, in terms
Like
of like
everything,
trying.
like
Yeah.
incentivizing homelessness, like incentivizing drug use, like everything that they spend money on causes the problems that they're pretending to solve. It's
Yeah.
absolutely absurd clown world
Right. Yeah. I
nonsense.
mean,
It's
like,
nonsense.
again, you get to like the housing stuff, like, which again, like, I think people think they're being good intention with that stuff, but like, really, like, it might be better if you just focused on like a small number of ways to incentivize developers to like build in your area by removing regulations rather than spending a boatload of money like over regulating people and then having to build houses or thinking you need to build houses because you've made it too difficult for the private sector to provide housing for you. So that's my theory of that. And then one last point on the tips thing though is like, what would
Yeah.
be better than like the tips thing? Because like one, there's a bit of a tipping culture where like you know, and Shelly kind of points this out on YouTube. Says right now servers are charged for 20% when the average is more like 12%. With a lot of stuff going to cards, like there's kind of an assumption of tips that ends up
Yeah.
happening, unfortunately, and so like they get kind of taxed extra on that. With cash tips, like there's not that, and like I mean, people like say like this is a gift, not a tip, and don't tax it, blah blah blah. I'm like that is a thing that sort of happens in the tipping industry. I don't think that necessarily needs to be disruptive. What I think would be better for servers, for cashiers, for other folks who are working in like relatively low wage jobs is just to do things like expand the like earned income tax credit or like just cut taxes for them generally, right? Like just across the board tax cuts. Simplify the tax code. Don't make one more exemption for things. Like just make it simpler and lower for everybody. And then cut the IRS by like to an eighth of what it is now, because we won't need that many people because the tax code is going to be simple.
Right. I do think that what I was advocating for, the chaos is because the inevitable conclusion, I think, would be lower taxes for everyone. So the chaos of being annoyed that your server's getting a distinct proportion of their money tax-free would lead to people saying, I deserve money tax-free. I'm not making more than that person. Give me my money tax-free. And they would demand it from their representatives and demand accountability, which arguably is a pipe dream because it doesn't happen either.
I mean, because there's already people who are like operating tax-free, right? Like it's already part of it. And like it hasn't like worked its way up. It's worked its way to like, I want to be tax-free. Go tax someone else. Sometimes like the rich, but like just go tax the other person. And then the government
right. No, you're right. I get that. This would be a targeted tax cut for servers, which would lead to people in that group demanding a tax cut as well. That income group, and I like that. Idea.
I want to get to the shorter version of that. Just get to the tax cut. Just cut the taxes for like everyone.
Sure, but they're not promising that. Okay,
no,
and
it'd
that's
be great if they would. I'm
better.
saying like if I were in the spaces with Donald Trump, I would say just cut the taxes, man. Just don't worry about the tips thing. I know it seems nice, but just cut taxes for everyone.
It would be better, and maybe you will be the libertarian in Trump's cabinet because of excellent suggestions like that.
Hopefully he hears this, and we make it happen.
Look, we got to get to a different subject. Elon Musk.
Real quick though. Dark Clouds in Mind says, Kevin, were you thinking of Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville? I was thinking of Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville.
I told you Voltaire, French guy. I knew
French
it.
Guy. Yes, you're like very close. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Thank you for doing it. It's driving me nuts. I'm like, I know this book. I have like read big chunks of it. It's kind of like dense, but man, it was driving me nuts. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. All right. So we've got a little bit of time in the show left. The ad cartel that Elon Musk just smashed into smithereens, dissolved them just by threatening to sue them. That is a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Well, was it Gamma or something? The ad
GARM, I guess.
GARM,
Global Alliance for Responsible Media, who basically, I think what they do is run a bunch of those phone banks that you see pictures of, where they've got hundreds of little cell phones on the wall, and they got one or two dudes like answering 1,000 tweets a day and like getting into arguments with the least of many evils. Like, I just know that's
what they're funding. It's like they're spending their time arguing with Tim on Twitter.
And then they report me for being mean, and it's obnoxious. It's just obnoxious.
Yeah. So yeah, I know that like the media nonprofit fell apart, but here's the thing. here's what's going to happen in that lawsuit. Because like that nonprofit fell apart, for better or worse. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with them. But a lot of these companies, they pulled out because like Twitter was unstable, that they weren't sure what was going to happen. And also Elon Musk went, I think on like the New York Times like podcast or something, and said like, don't advertise with me. I want you to not advertise with me anymore. And then they did. And like all these major companies pulled out because they're like, well, we aren't sure what's going to happen because like you're cutting half of the developer team and you're saying erratic things, and it seems like there's like some, I think we talked about it before, there's some like brand reputation issues where like, oh look, this Apple ad is popping up under like a Nazi meme. And
sure, and that was happening when it was Jack, and they were trying to shape the discussion, and they presented an undue amount of influence, and he said, all right, well, I'll sue you for collusion and for, I don't know, some other stuff. Like they got so scared they dissolved themselves. That was,
well, they didn't, I mean, it wasn't just like this nonprofit that was doing it. It's like these major corporations who independently decided as well, like it wasn't just this nonprofit. It's like they independently decided, this isn't a good bet right now. I'm just going to throw my money to CTV instead of Twitter, right? Like that's the connect, like streaming services instead of Twitter. They're giving their money to like Amazon instead.
They'll be back.
They might be like, again, like I don't expect corporations to like really have any like solid attachment to like their morals in the long term. Like they're looking to make money. Like, and I don't say as a positive or negative.
No morals. They have
no, right. If Twitter's going to make them money, then they're going to advertise on Twitter. Like that. That's correct. It. That's full stop. Like that's what it is.
His presentation of the point is that they were trying to directly impact the amount of money that Twitter was able to make, and he found that to be offensive. That it was an attack.
We spent a whole show talking about.
Only.
Tim, we spent a whole show talking about like free speech. Do you not think boycotts are free speech?
Boycotts are absolutely free speech, but responses to boycotts are also free speech. And
no, he's trying to use the law to shut down a boycott.
What's that?
He's trying to use the law to shut down a boycott.
Or was it a manipulation, and was it a vicious attack and slander?
Okay, Keir Starmer. I mean, you just sound like
I don't know about that. I don't think I sound like Keir Starmer.
No, okay, that was a bit far, but like nonetheless, like we have a lot of protections, like being able to make an argument, like we don't think you should do business with this company because this company stinks for X, Y, and Z reasons. And then if you convince people, like it is your right to do that. If you're saying something like that is a lie, like and that's damaging in that way, yeah, there's some remedies for that. But if it wasn't untrue, it was just disagreeable or inconvenient, then they have a right.
They didn't want to face the possibility of those remedies being true, that he was going to bear out that they were doing manipulative things like phone walls of like recycled cell phones to manipulate the algorithm against people who could be presenting good content, but they just don't like the content. Like they don't like, let's say they don't like libertarians, Kevin. And so
it doesn't manipulate the algorithm
against libertarians.
They have a right to say, I don't think Apple should advertise with X because X allows libertarians on their platform. And it's their right to
say that if they believe it, right? But should they underhandedly manipulate the entire algorithm to ruin people's
them? We're just like making an argument, Tim.
That I don't believe that's exactly what they were doing, and I don't believe that was.
Some companies bought into it. Some companies made their independent decisions, and yeah, I think again, as an advertiser, like I don't like when the head of a company is like, "We're going to sue you for not advertising anymore," because that makes me think I never want to advertise with that company ever. But Tim, we can continue, but we do have to end the WYSL show. Thanks again for joining us here on WYSL. Have a great night, folks. Take care.
I think that we both are kind of adding information that I don't know is there. I had a pretty good article about it, but then while we were talking about it, and once I pulled it up,
so I've kind of bid this up from like advertising TikTok, right? So talking about that. So that's where I'm getting my information on this stuff, which is the community is kind of like yeah, like it's not great. Like if my company were like, if I were with an agency that were advertising on Twitter and we decide not to advertise for one reason or another, like,
Mhm.
would we be liable? Would we be caught up in this boycott? Right. And some of those companies, like, they had their own independent reasons for doing this, but like, what are they going to face, like, legal liability? Are they going to have to lawyer up? Are they going to have to pay money in order to, like, defend themselves? And that's kind of the argument, like, with the nonprofit, because they're like, we can't afford the legal fees, to participate in this lawsuit. Twitter X is shutting us down because we made a speech argument, and now we don't have the financial resources to, like, be able to defend ourselves in court, because, like, they're gonna, you know, throw everything at us. But again, so I tend to actually, like, side against X on this one. As much as, like, Elon Musk likes to make a big stink about being free speech, and in fact, we said nice things about Elon Musk today. Like, I think this goes back to, like, in the way they do like libel laws in the UK. Like, like, I see this as, like, sort of in the same vein.
Yeah, I'm trying to find because I had it up and I felt as though there was like a clearly malicious manipulation where they were actively and maybe this is my imagination or maybe I'm conflating it with something else, but that they were actively manipulating the algorithm, and that was in fact what they were getting sued for. So I don't know that I'm right. And if I'm wrong, I don't care because I have free speech.
Yeah,
How do you like that?
there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all free speech. What other stories you have? Should we?
There's one that we've got to talk about because like
Alright.
microplastics are in everybody's like bodily parts and just basically destroying the entire world. And I hope I can find it because oh no, I found the sloth virus though. Have you heard about that?
No.
Oh my
What's
God. Get
that?
ready for the sloth virus, bro.
Uh,
That's all I want to say.
that sounds scary. Okay.
Well, it's not a slow moving virus like the name might imply, but it was
Tim, how much toilet paper should I buy?
well, yeah, it's a Zika-like illness that they're worried may, in fact, cause birth defects, but they don't have any proof of that yet. And it's the sloth virus. There's already been 19 people infected in Europe. Um, everyone survived, but it came from a. Here's where it gets scary, right? Is it came from sloths through mosquitoes to humans. So there is that
Those
tiny
things
little bit of
happen.
concern. But I think they're pretty much ready to shut down the world over it. So
Maybe we'll see how it goes.
yeah.
All right. What you're saying is it's time to start buying toilet paper. How many? I'm gonna buy like 15 or 16 things of toilet paper. I'll show some restraint.
I think you're going to need more than that.
All right. You're right. You're right.
Months and months worth.
Better be
Inflation
prepared.
milestone consumer price index slows below 3% for the first time since March 2021. I was pretty sure about 3 months ago that they were claiming that Robert Reich and Paul Krugman were claiming that the inflation rate was under like 2.2% or 2.1%. And they were all celebrating. Did those numbers get revised, Kevin?
I don't know. I haven't seen like the new numbers and people claiming that it's fell below a certain point. So I do remember seeing that a while ago, but I don't know. I haven't seen it this time. Maybe it just haven't made its way to me yet.
Yeah, well, they're saying that now it's almost below 3% or arguably below 3%, like 2.9%. Reason, with one of its best articles that everyone should celebrate, just reminding everyone that Tyrant Waltz was a COVID-19 authoritarian, COVID-19 tyrant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reason. Where
He
is
was.
that?
He's bad. As much as he wants to be like, mind your own damn business, like, like
He's
no,
not
not really.
really
Like, like he said some like nice like libertarian like sounding things. It's just that it doesn't at all translate to any like decent policy.
His decent policy was marching cops down the street, shooting paintballs at residents of freaking Milwaukee if they were out on their porches after curfew. Like that's that guy. Okay, when that stuff was going around the news, he was marching cops down the streets shooting people
Well, it's funny because
with
like
paintball guns.
I've
to
heard
get back in their
conservatives say
house.
like he didn't call out the National Guard quick enough, and he totally failed in the George Floyd riots.
There was another one. There's arguments that he was participatory and that his wife loved the George Floyd riots. I don't know if I
Yeah.
buy into that stuff. That could be just wives have the right to say stupid things that are stupid. And there is an argument like he carried a gun in during a wartime. Like he did try to steal a little bit of valor. Like he's kind of gross like that. His kid was like his kid was like sending out texts to her friends to warn them about where the National Guard was going to be. She could have only gotten that information from her dad. Like, okay, but that's, they're weird. Astronauts still stuck in space. Could be there for 8 more months.
Did you see the story about how I'm sorry. I lost my page on accident. There's a civil asset forfeiture case out in Indiana.
Oh my God, you posted something about that. And
the government was just like they're going to a FedEx shipping hub and they would just run canines around there, and any cash that they found, they would just confiscate, like without notifying any of having any specific crime that they suspected of. Again, civil asset forfeiture is basically where the government can just take your stuff if they think that stuff is used in the process of committing a crime. So it's like, oh, you might have used that boat for drug running, we're gonna take your boat. And they do this with cash all the time. They're like, oh, we think that cash might be part of a drug operation, so we're gonna take it. And then you're like, hey, do you have any evidence of this being part of a drug operation? Nope. Why don't you file some paperwork, and maybe in 2-3 years we'll give it back to you. And that's what happened in this. They stole, like, there's someone who had sent cash for a jewelry business out in California, and the government just stole the cash and didn't prove any crime had been committed. Just started. I mean, like, this is just stealing stuff. Like, there's no, like, if you take, like, I don't know, like, if a vehicle that, like, someone gets caught with like 40 bricks of cocaine, okay, sure, like, morals of
I'm a little like
morals of the war on drug aside, like, okay, like, sure, you could at least make the argument that was being used in, like, the furtherance of crime. Okay, but sometimes it's like literally like stealing houses from grandmas because, like, her son, who is like a marijuana dealer, like, sometimes visited the house. Like,
right. That was the point I was going to make about the car. As long as it's titled to the guy that they're like found the 40 kilos of coke with, but like if he borrowed grandma's car, like they shouldn't be able to take grandma's car indefinitely, even if that kid bought it for her as a gift. Like, that's obnoxious. And like,
and then, and then the cash thing, it's like they just, like, police officers will take cash all the time. Like, no actual evidence of a crime other than, like, the evidence of a crime is that someone has a bunch of cash on them. That's it. Oh, they have $1,000 on them. They have $2,000 on them. Okay, yep, that's suspicious. We're gonna just take that until we can prove that this wasn't used in a crime. It's a total reversal of due process, and it's just theft. Like, there's like, it's just the theft that exists outside of, like, taxation. It's just that's what we used to do before taxation, is governments just to be like, oh, that's mine now. That's mine.
Yeah, I mean,
we put some, like, polish on it now. We've polished that turd with taxation. Hey, we will stop taking your stuff arbitrarily if you give us your stuff on a regular basis.
Patty is out there in YouTube land. She had how much food and water do the astronauts have now? Interestingly enough, they're stuck on the space station out in space, but they are able to still dock. I think the Russians just docked with them and brought them some supplies. So now they're going to have to bring them parts to fix the thing that's wrong with their space station. Like, so they're going to be okay as long as we can keep sending rockets up there to resupply them.
Yeah, I think like they're able to get like SpaceX rockets up there. It's just that like the one
Yeah.
particular dock, like the Boeing vehicle is like locked to it.
Yeah.
And
Credit
it's like
farming.
they could get down. It's just that like it's not as safe as they want.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting way of drawing attention to the space program. It's kind of an interesting way of experimenting or developing systems of resupply of people arguably stuck in space, which
Space.
arguably is the right word there, right? Like they
Yeah.
probably aren't actually stuck in space.
Yeah,
it's
but
kind of fun.
it's
It's
close
kind of
enough.
an interesting story to follow along with, though.
Yeah, and all right, how do we do that and do it quickly? And are there systems to be able to do it? So actually, I read a book recently called A City on Mars,
Mhm.
and it
By
is
Elon Musk.
no. So they talk about Elon Musk quite a bit. It's Kelly and Zach Wienersmith are the authors, and they started writing a book about like all the cool space developments happening. Basically, like the Elon Musk stuff with SpaceX and the Jeff Bezos stuff with Blue Origin, and like look at how much like stuff we're able to put in space now, and look how cheap it's gotten. And they started like digging into like so we're totally gonna have like a city on Mars soon, right? Like we're gonna be living in space. And then they start like digging into all the stuff, and they're like, no, we're like hundreds of years away from being able to like have any sort of permanent space settlement. Like even on the moon, like it's going to be temporary research bases for at least decades, possibly centuries.
Lifetimes. Lifetimes. No one alive today is going to be living on Mars. Sorry.
Yeah. Like at least not long term. Like you might go there, like some astronaut might go there for like a few months.
Yeah.
But like a permanent space settlement with like thousands and thousands of people, they really go into the nitty gritty of like all the reasons why it's going to be bad, like why the moon is bad, why space stations with permanent residence would be bad, like not ISS like permanent residence, like like living there for like years and years, why we might not be able to have babies in space, like why why the Mars soil is terrible, it's all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm a big Terrence Howard fan. I think we need to be looking in the other direction, more towards the sun, as we're like, if we get closer to the sun, we stand like planets are gradually drifting away from the sun. I think this is going to work out better.
We're going to go to Venus?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think
once
Venus
we solve greenhouse gases here, we'll solve greenhouse gases there. And then Venus is going to be great and livable.
As it moves away from the greenhouse gases are carbon emissions, Kevin. That's what they're complaining about. We need that stuff to survive. Like it's very human. These things. You didn't just go all climate alarmist on me, did you?
No. I'm just saying, like, once if we want to like limit the amount of greenhouse gas in the on Earth, because like we decide that there's a good climate reason for that, we're going to do a bit of geoengineering. Once we figured out that, we could do that to Venus too.
10-4.
I'm just saying that then we're not geoengineering, we're terraforming.
Yeah, that
I mean that's
like the concept of terraforming. According to Terrence Howard, it won't be necessary. Just patience is all that it takes. As the sun
patience in like billions of years terms.
Yeah, he's definitely thinking about it like that. He also has suggested that there's life on Mars already and Jupiter, and that it's most likely underground. So who knows?
It might be. It might be the case for Mars, and like not Jupiter probably, but like Io. Yeah, underneath the ice.
He's not just a talented actor, Kevin. He is kind of a super genius. Yeah, or he's not. I mean, I'm not sure, but here's some wild theories and that I enjoy. Do you know what graphene is?
Yeah.
Do you? What is it?
Like it's like really thin layers of like carbon that can be built into strong structures.
Well, that's exactly what it is. So as we know, I started to allude to this that microplastics seem to be a real problem, and they are taking up residence inside of human bodies and creating real problems. But scientists have achieved a rapid upcycling of microplastics into graphene. So with some sort of kind of, and it sounds so Star Trek-y. They've got some sort of like microplasma discombobulator that literally will slice the microplastics into graphene, usable graphene, which is a
Just
thin,
making the
it can be used as a-
microplastics even smaller.
yeah, because then it turns into graphene. And so like I'm picturing like a graphene coated like driver, and I think I'm going to be able to hit the ball like 700 yards. I can just see it. Like
This
this
feel
is
like nothing. Just
bam. Guys, I'm telling you, the future is beautiful. But anyways, so arguably it's like an interesting way of dealing with what appears to be an environmental toxin, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to recycle it sooner, turn it into graphene, which has multitudes of uses. Multitudes. I'm going to paint my car with graphene. I think it sounds like, I mean,
Do it.
Seems like it would be good for paint, the way they're describing it. Thin layers of carbon that make it incredibly strong. It's like harder than a diamond, apparently. So,
I mean, if you set it up right. But
just weld it somehow. I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
the only thing I've seen like how like they make graphene, basically like they take like tape onto like graphite and like pull it up, and then it like rearranges the structure when they do that, and it pulls off like a single layer of atoms.
Okay. That sounds pretty interesting, really.
Yeah. A couple more comments and maybe we'll call it a night. But Patricia on YouTube says robots will build it, they will come. Read the book. I'm telling you, like, if you want a real bummer of a book about space, about like why robots are not gonna like be able to like build like our cities, and we're gonna be able to we're just a ways off is the point. Just because there's not many usable resources on the moon or possibly even Mars for that matter. And it's like from a profitability perspective, like it's just not there. So it's going to be massive government subsidies. It's the only way to do it, they think. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe Elon discovers some space gold that is valuable enough to like justify the resources to get all this stuff back. But so far, most of the use cases are like more close to Earth, like satellites and stuff like that. And then this quick comment. I remember the early 80s when some space junk fell in a guy's yard in Florida. I mean, that's the thing that happens.
I was thinking about that. Like, just let it fall. It'll burn up in the atmosphere and turn into smaller pieces. And everything will be fine.
It was a thing that happened in Canada too. And the other thing the book spends a lot of time on like international law and stuff like that. Like, what happens if a private company like drops a bunch of space junk into someone's house? Like, we don't really. There's not that many cases of that happening. So like, we don't know how we like deal with that when a Russian company does this and it smashes into, an American or a Canadian's house, or an American company does it and it smashes into like an Ethiopian's house,
Well, here's how Trump will do it is he will automatically create a new court and limit their liability because of the inherent value of space exploration. I mean, You get my
I got the reference. I got the reference. It's the vaccine court. I get it.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty well done.
Yeah. But
all right, brother, it's late.
Yeah, no, just call it a night. Thanks for listening, folks. Thanks for participating in the comments. You guys rock as usual. We really appreciate it.
Shelly talking like a physicist. Like, I just found an article, Shelly. Don't put that kind of pressure on me. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna have to learn so much more about graphene now. Be prepared.
Yep.
On that note, though, have a good night, folks. Take care.
Good night, everybody.